Hello, I'm Mrs H. You can find my patterns at www.mrs-h.com. Today's video we're going to be sewing the handy sack, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a really handy sack. Now we did initially call this the packing sack, but as we've gone on and used them and as my testers have used them, we've realised this is a really handy pattern to have in your collection. It's a really handy bag to have and you can use it for so many different varieties, not just packing. The pattern comes in two sizes and I've got the large and the small here. I'll hold them up to compare them. And this is the small. This is the one that we're going to be sewing in this video. All of the fabrics for this project have come from sewhot.co.uk, although I did purchase some of them and some of them were provided for me to do the video. I've used cord and a cord lock, and I've used ribbon and a cord lock for that one, but I've also used just plain ribbon and a cord lock for some that I've got at home as well. So it comes with a hanging loop or a little handle if you want, or you can leave that off. You can use these as a gift bag or a packing sack. You can use it as a laundry bag, you can use it as a sports kit bag, swimming bag. I mean, you can stuff them full of treats and send them to me. I don't mind. You can use them however you want. This pattern has got inverted boxed corners. So, in fact, let me take the stuffing out of this one and I'll show you the features of it. No, hang on. Let me not get confused. Let me show you the sizes and then I'll show you how they function. Okay, so this is the small and this one is the large. You can see that the large is quite sizable. So myself and my husband and my daughter went away for a week and my daughter was able to use the small as her laundry bag for the week and there was still plenty of space in it, and myself and my husband used the large and there was still space in it at the end of the week. Okay, these exact ones actually, so I have washed them since, don't worry. I've used a water resistant coated cotton, not only to provide that water resistantness, but also there's no interfacing and no stabilisers in this pattern at all. Everything comes from the structure of, or well, the construction gives it the structure. Okay, so if you're not using water resistant coated cotton, you might want to add a bit of interfacing or stabiliser in there. There's no lining at all. It's a real quick, cheap project, sorry, inexpensive project to make. Okay, so I'm going to pop the large down and I'll show you the construction of them. So you've got this little channel at the top for your drawstring. You've got the hanging loop or handle. You can always add another one. You can add a long strap if you want to make this into something that you can carry. Let me take the stuffing out, a few tea towels in there. The base has got these inverted box corners. Okay, so they look completely flat from the side, but then underneath you can see they've got this inverted box corner shape, and that's really handy because it means you can fold this almost completely flat, so it's handy for taking away. But once you pop some contents in there, they will stand on their own without any extra stabilizer. Okay, this one's slightly stiffer than the mustard one, just due to the fabric that I've used. All of the seams inside, as I said, there's no interfacing, there's no stabilizer, there's also no lining. All of the seams inside are French seams, so there's no raw edges, and the same along the top there as well. Okay, it's a super simple pattern to make, although there are a couple of new techniques in here, so I do recommend you watch the video if you are a visual learner. But basically, I think they're very satisfying and you can knock them up in not very much time at all. So why don't you go ahead and grab your materials and we'll get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take our main panel A, so that's my waterproof or water resistant coated cotton. You could use vinyl or regular cotton, or you could coat it with Eau de Coat to make it waterproof, or spray it with something, your choice. But there's no interfacing in this bag, So using something like this coated cotton just gives it that little extra bit of stability, as well as making it water resistant. So handy for laundry or muddy kit or swimwear, or just the possibilities are endless. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to find the center of the panel. So all I've done is fold it in half, matching the short ends, and find the centers. And then I've added a pin in each side, only in the seam allowance. Okay, so don't add it too far in. I've literally just added it in the seam allowance, so there's no holes in this main bit inside the seam allowance, or outside the seam allowance, I guess. And then I've added a pin either side and on both edges. Okay, now the measurements for these pins differs for the small and the large. I'm making the small because my table's not huge here and I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so just check the pattern for what the measurements are for that. So you'll have a pin in the center and either side of the center according to the measurements in the pattern. Okay, and then all we're going to do is, oh hang on, I've put the wrong page on my pattern. I've gone straight to page 4. That's not right, is it? Following the pattern so I don't tell you anything wrong, and then I've got the pages in the wrong way. That's no good, is it? Now we did change the name of this pattern from the packing sack to the handy sack, because with use, and obviously as the testers have come to use them, we've realised this is useful for so much more than just packing. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold our panel wrong sides together, and we're going to follow these first top pins. Okay, so the pins that are closest to the short end, we're going to fold along those wrong sides together. Okay, so your right side is out and your wrong sides are together. Okay, so the top short ends will have a difference, and these measurements are again in the pattern and they differ for small and large. Okay, so when you fold along these pins, the first set of pins, and they should match on both sides, just make sure that your measurement, your difference at the top here, matches what it says in the pattern for the size that you are making. Okay, and then we're just going to finger press within the seam allowance. So we're not going to fold along the whole length of it, because when we have finished it we will fold it and it doesn't always match up exactly at the end, depending on how accurate you are with your seams. So it's better to just finger press within the seam allowances, and you can, if you've got a little spoon, just give it a little press down on these corners, just to make sure that those are nice and crisp folds. Okay, and then I'm going to add a clip just to hold it in place. Just one either side will be fine. Okay, and that's purely just to hold this in place while we're working with it. Okay, and now we can fold it again, but this time with the third set of pins. Okay, so the middle set of pins we're ignoring, they should be in the center, but this next set of pins that's closest to this short end, that's the one we're going to fold this time, and we're going to bring that down to meet that first fold. Okay, so here's my first fold here, and I've folded along this second set of pins and brought that down to match, and that should in theory match at the top there. Your middle pin should be at the center of this fold. Okay, so it should be now let me smooth that out and check. Yeah, so my short ends match again, they're still wrong sides together, and my folds here match, and it's a sort of a bit of a dip in the middle there. So you should have 2 pins at the end on these 2 folds, and one pin in the middle, and it's a sort of a W shape that we're aiming for. Okay, so once you've got those accurate, and by accurate I mean that these side edges match up and this top edge matches up as best you can, and we can clip these together. Okay. And then we're going to sew along these side edges. To use my mishmash of clips, I've not long come back from retreat and I seem to have a mishmash of clips. I think my colourful ones have mixed with my black ones. Right, so I've got my opening here. We are not going to sew this at all, and I've got my folded bottom here. We are not going to sew that at all. We're literally just going to sew up each side edge. Okay, and I'm going to use my regular stitch length for this, and the seam allowance we are going to be using is 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance for this one. Okay, and I'm going to start at this bottom folded edge so I can make sure that I can keep these accurate. I'll take my pins out so they don't get caught under my presser foot. Okay, so I'm sewing at 1/4 inch, my regular stitch length, and I am going to back stitch at the start and the end. You can also back stitch as you go over where that middle pin is, so where the fold meets inside. You can do that as well if you would like to. Okay, so I've gone all the way to the end and back stitched. And trim my threads. Now it's very important to trim your threads as you go on this one, because we're going to be doing French seams throughout and we don't want our pins getting in the way. Sorry, not pins, our threads getting in the way, because otherwise they will show on the final bag. Okay, so I've sewn one side. I'm going to flip it over now and start from the folds and do exactly the same again. So I'm sewing with 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance, back stitching at the start, the end, and where my fold is, although that's personal preference. Trim that thread and trim this thread, and I'll take my extra pin out. Okay, what we're going to do now is we are going to clip the seam allowance in this bottom corner. Okay, there is a picture in the pattern, but this folded end, this is the bottom, and we are going to clip a bit of the bulk out of that bottom corner without cutting through our stitches. Okay. So go as close as you can whilst not cutting through your stitches, and don't worry too much because there will be another seam running over this. Okay, what we're going to do is just double check there's no loose threads showing. Okay, and then we're going to turn this wrong sides out. Right, so now we need to, oh dear, what's going on here? I think my vinyl's maybe a little bit sticky, my cotton's a little bit sticky. Okay, so push these seams out all the way, and you can finger roll them or you can just push them out, and I'm going to push this bottom corner. So where it comes out as a triangle, just fold it over. Okay. You can push from inside there as well, just to get that out nice and neat. But you basically want a little extra fold of fabric along the bottom. Okay, So I'm going to run my spoon up the seam, the side seam. Make sure this seam is nicely rolled out. Now this is the most time consuming part, I think, is making sure that this seam is nice and accurate. You just need to make sure that that seam line is directly in the center of where you're clipping, because the next seam we sew will just enclose all of those raw edges along that side. Okay, that one's done. We can do the next side now. Just running my spoon up the seam just to fold that out. Use the pointy end to make this sit nice and straight in the corners. It doesn't seem like it's quite fully out. If you don't get this fully accurate, then you will see a little bit of your first seam of stitching in your final bag. So just take the time to get this nice and accurate. Okay, and just finger roll these seams again, same as we did before. This will be the quickest actual main body of a bag you've ever made, I expect. Okay, and then we're going to sew along both long edges again from the bottom to the top. This time we're going to use a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'm going to start from the bottom, again back stitch at the bottom, back stitch at the top. You can back stitch over this fold again if you'd like. That's your choice. I'm just using my regular stitch length. Okay, so 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre, back stitching, and then whizzing up the side. Lovely. Just trim those threads off. This seam will be inside your bag, okay, because there's no lining, so this seam will be seen inside your bag. And then just flip it over and do the same on the other side. Trim these threads. There we go. Now if you've got a flatbed machine like mine, you're going to want to turn this right sides out. If you've got a free arm, you can leave it like this inside out. Okay, right, so I'm just going to turn mine through. It doesn't really matter about getting the base out fully at this point. So that's the main part of my bag done, and we can turn to the cotton part now. Okay, let's pop this to one side, and you'll want to retrieve your handle or your hanging loop C. Okay, and this is just plain cotton. Now we haven't included any interfacing in this pattern, just to try and reduce costs down for you, and it is perfectly fine without, because you've got 4 layers of fabric in this hanging loop. However, if you know that the recipient is going to be particularly heavy handed with it, or something really heavy is going to go in there, like, I don't know, that many marbles, you might want to add a little bit of interfacing to it. Okay, so all we're going to do with this is fold it in half lengthwise and give it a press. Now I've pressed mine already because my tiny iron is unfortunately spitting water. So I've pressed it already, but we're just going to fold it in half, press, open out, and then fold each long edge into the center and press, and then fold it in half again and give it another press. So you should have a nice fully enclosed, all your raw edges are hidden in the middle there. And then all I'm going to do is sew along both long edges. I'm going to use a slightly longer top stitching length, so I'm using a 3.5 on my machine rather than my 2.5, just to make it slightly neater. And I'm just going to sew along each long edge 1/8 of an inch or 3mm away from the edge. You don't need to worry about back stitching because this will be in a seam. This will be fully enclosed in a seam. Okay, so I've gone down one long edge and then go down the second long edge. Okay, trim these threads off. Again, this is something that's quite important in this one. No loose threads, otherwise they will show. Okay. Right, now what we're going to do is get our main bag back, and we need to find the centre. So I'm just folding this in half so that I'm matching my side seams, pulling them out nice and proud, and then I can fold the whole thing in half, matching the side seams to find the centre. And I'm going to mark the centres, and I'm going to mark them front and back because we'll need to know where they are for our drawstring casing as well. Okay. Right, so once you're happy, if you've got a front or a back, then you can pay attention to that. I haven't got a front or a back. And we are just going to pop this onto here, but only on the one layer. Okay, so open that up, just pop it onto there. So let's have a look at the measurements. I bet I've forgotten a ruler as well. Hang on, I'll get my ruler out of my case. Sorry, talk amongst yourselves for a second. Okay, and the measurements for this are in the pattern again. Okay, so we're measuring from the centre to the inside edge of the loop. So I'm going to pop a little mark there and a little mark on the other side. So I've got my centre and then the mark either side, and then I can just pop my hanging loop. So I'm matching the raw edge to the raw edge of the main bag, and the inside edge to that mark I've just made. Now pop the second side on, making sure it's not twisted, unless you particularly want a twisted hanging loop, in which case I think that would probably work just as well. And then we're just going to baste this into place. So I'm using my longest stitch length, and I'm just going to sew over. I'm not going to do multiple lines of sewing. I'm just going to sew over it once. I don't want to make too many holes in my water resistant cotton. Okay, so I've back stitched, sewn over, back stitched, and then I go to the other side, back stitch, sew over and back stitch. And remember, trim these threads. This is again really important. I'm not very good at trimming my threads usually, which you'll know if you've watched my videos, but on this occasion it is worth it. Okay, it is important. Right, so I've just sewn that on using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You could do 1/8 of an inch if you prefer, but 1/4 inch is fine. Okay, and then we can pop this to one side. Okay, and we're going to retrieve our top casing. So that's C. Okay, this is our long piece. Again, this is not interfaced. You can interface it if you think that your recipient is going to be particularly heavy-handed, but I made a few and we've used them for a few trips now, and my daughter is quite enthusiastic, should we say, and I haven't had any tears or rips or anything, so I'm fairly confident that these are sturdy enough. But if you, knowing your recipient, want to add interfacing, you can. Okay, so I've added my safety pin here so I don't forget to bring it up with me. Okay, so all we're going to do on each short end, and again I've pressed these already downstairs because I haven't got my well, I have got my tiny iron, but it's having a little break at the moment. Okay, so all we're going to do is fold in each short end by 1/4 inch, and to do that I've drawn a line at 1/2 inch or 1.2 centimeters away from the edge and folded the short end of my fabric to that line, so I know that's 1/4 inch or 6 mil, and then I've just folded it again and given it a little press. Okay. Oh, got one of these clips. Okay, so we'll do that on both ends, and then we are going to top stitch these into place. And you can do it on the wrong side if you like, or the right side. I know that I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance or 6 mil seam allowance, so I know that I can sew an 1/8 inch or 3 mil, and it should be in the center. And change my stitch length back down again, and again you don't need to back stitch at the start and the end because this is going into a seam allowance. I'm just going to sew this at an 1/8 inch or 3 mil from the folded edge. And here's one I prepared earlier. Ta-da! I'm going to do the same on the other end. So we've got a bit of a narrow hem there on both ends. Okay, lovely. So we'll take that out. Remember to trim your threads again. Okay. Lovely. Then all we're going to do is fold this in half, wrong sides together. Okay. So start with your end that's got the little tiny hem, and then match it up. So mine's got lines on it, so I'm going to make sure that my lines are matching on both sides, just because I expect that's something that I will notice if I don't. Okay, so I'm just clipping all the way along. You don't have to do this if you are confident that you can just pop it under the machine as it is, but I'm clipping mine because I've got my lines. Okay, then we are going to sew along this long edge using an 1/8 inch or 3 mil seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to start at the end. Don't need to back stitch, but you can if you would like to. And we're just going to whiz along the whole length. Just making sure my long edges match as I pop it through under the presser foot. Okay, lovely. So we'll trim our threads again. Okay, and I'll do the other side as well, so that all my threads are off. Okay, now we can retrieve our main bag. Okay, so that's this main body bit. Okay, and we are going to attach it to the wrong side. Okay, so if your bag is inside out because you've got a free arm, then you'll be attaching it on the wrong side here. Mine is right sides out, so I'm going to be attaching it here inside. Okay, so first thing I need to do is find the center of this casing. Okay, and I'll mark that with a pin because this is just cotton, so it doesn't matter how many pin marks I pop in that. Okay, and then I'm going to match that up to the center at the back, again on the wrong side. Okay, so I know it feels a bit peculiar to be doing this back to front, it's on the wrong side, but it will all make sense in the end. Okay, I'm just going to work my way round, and you can pop your side seams either way. They can be facing the front or the back, it doesn't really matter, however you prefer. Okay, I'm working my way all the way around. Okay. And I'll go back and do the other side as well. Okay, I'm just going to work my way around again. All the way round until they are at the front. Okay. There we go. Right, so they are even at the front, and now we're going to sew this into place. Okay, so we're going to sew it using a 1/4 inch or 6mm seam allowance and our regular stitch length. Now, because I've got a flatbed machine, and that's why I've popped mine on like this. Okay, so I think I'm going to start from my opening. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am going to back stitch at the start and the end just to be a bit extra secure. And I'm going to back stitch over the end of the casing. Okay, and then we're just going to go all the way round the top. Maintaining that 1/4 inch seam allowance, 6mm seam allowance. Okay, now as you come towards where your handle is or your hanging loop, just go straight over it and off the other side. Okay, just got mine tangled up under there, so just make sure it's nice and flat and just go straight over it. I'm going to trim these threads actually where I started now, and then I know they're out of the way. Carry on all the way round till you get back to where you started. And I'll just do a couple of back stitches. Okay, so trim those threads. Now you will want to have a little look along the top and just double check you haven't got any loose threads hanging around, and if you have, just give them a little snip. Okay, we don't want those. Okay, right, Now all we're going to do is fold this over the seam, so pull it out. I'm going to fold it over so that this seam is out nice and proud. I've got a loose thread there, okay, and you can finger roll this. So we just want to make sure that this seam line is sitting exactly centrally there. Okay, so we're folding it over the existing seam and giving it a little clip. Okay. There we go. Now I think I might have cut my top casing wrong because it doesn't quite meet in the middle as intended, but it will work just as well, so don't panic. In theory you'll have cut yours accurately and it will match perfectly, in theory. So for mine, I will have a tiny bit of a raw edge of my water resistant coated cotton showing, but on yours you shouldn't because your casing will meet. Okay, I think I might need to double check the measurements on my rulers and make sure I follow them. And I can't even blame anybody else because I cut this out myself. Okay, right, so I'm just working my way around, pushing out the seam, finger rolling it out. It is worth taking the time to do this because we're going to sew a French seam now that will enclose all of these raw edges. Got a real mishmash of clips today. I think I need to have a little sort out. There's always something more important to do though, isn't there? These kind of tasks. Like sewing a new bag. Okay, so where we come to the handle, it will be slightly bulkier. Okay, just give it a nice tug and manipulate that fabric into the position that you need it. Okay. Right, nearly back to, oh, I am back to where I started. There we go, great. Okay, now we're going to sew this using our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's 1 centimetre for those of you working in metric. We're going to use our regular seam allowance, and it doesn't really matter where you start, but I think I'm going to start here at the front where my gap is. Okay, and this bag is big enough for me to not have to worry too much about the fact that I've got a flatbed machine. I've taken the wrong clips off. I'll take these clips off. My foot is a little bit bulkier. Okay. Right, so I am going to back stitch at the start and the end. And I'm following the 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'm just going all the way around the top. Okay, lovely. I can trim my threads again. That's great. Okay, so the majority of our bag is done. Now I can worry about folding out my bottom corners, and all you do is just give it a little tug where they're joined together in the bottom there, and they'll come out nice and proud. Okay, there we go. That looks great. It looks very geometric, doesn't it? So now, if you're using cotton, you can give this a little press along these bottom folds, or you can just give it a nice finger press, or you can give it a spoon press, which is my preferred method of pressing things like this that you don't want to press on the actual fabric. Okay. Oh yeah, my bit doesn't meet at all very well. I think I must have cut that completely incorrectly, and I need to double check myself. Okay, right, so the only thing left to do then is to turn this into a drawstring. Now you'll notice that the bag can fold completely flat. That's because of this base, these inverted box corners. But once you pop things into it, it will have more of a 3D shape. So we need the drawstring to be able to close the bag. So I've got my cord here, and I've just melted the ends and sort of squeeze them together to make them nice and small. And I'm just using a safety pin. If you've got bodkin, that would also work. Okay, and I'm going to just push this through my casing until it comes out the other side. Now the only thing to take care of here is to make sure that you don't lose your loose end inside your casing. So just pay attention to where it is as you're working your way round. Lovely. And because this is such a big casing, it's actually really easy to thread the cord through, which is nice. Now before I go any further, I am going to clip this loose end to the top of my casing, just so that I don't accidentally lose it, and then I can go back to threading. Okay, nearly there. Lovely. Right, so don't worry too much about these ends being even just yet. Don't panic about those. Just make sure that you've got hold of both and they are not going to be lost. Okay. So what we need to do now is just pop these through our cord lock. So what I like to do is squish them together as best I can, and then pop them into that central part of the cord lock. Okay, and they do get stuck a little bit, that's okay. And then I can use a pin or safety pin just to encourage each part out. You do have to squeeze the cord lock while you're doing this. Okay, so if you've got somebody with a strong grip, then encourage them to come and help you. Once you've got both ends out, you can either tie both ends together in a little knot, or you can tie them both separately. Your choice. Don't know which to do really. I think I might do them together, and then I know that they will always be even-ish. Okay. I'll just tie those into a little knot, pull that as close down as I can. My cord lock stays on, okay. And now is the point where you can even these strings up. Oh dear, that's not very even at all, is it? Okay, there we go. Very much not perfectly even. Oh, that's better. There we go, even. Okay, so once it's undone, it's got a beautiful big opening for you to pop things in. If you use a nice firm water resistant coated cotton, this actually sits nice and open like a basketball hoop, which is perfect for laundry baskets on backs of doors for little girls who are around about 9-ish. And I say that from experience. Because they will just chuck their laundry in there rather than leaving it on the floor, which is nice. Okay, or alternatively you can have it sitting on the floor. That's fine. Once this gets a bit of contents in there, it will sit nice and flat on that inverted boxed base. But again, it will fold very, very small. If you're going away and you want to take with you a laundry bag, you can fold that very, very flat. That will take up barely any space at all in your suitcase, in your luggage. And then when you come back, you can just pop all your dirty laundry in that, do the drawstring up and transport it home separately from your clean clothes. So I'm really pleased with that. I think that looks great, and also it's very, very practical. So I am pleased with how that's turned out. I think I might have, no, oh my goodness, one of the lines on my fabric is white, and I thought I had a raw edge. Phew, thought I had a raw edge. Okay, so I am chuffed with that. I think that looks great. I would love to see if you make your own handy sack. You can even make it as a gift bag, or have in the car for your shopping bags, or as a little rubbish bin if you've got very messy passengers, or you can use it as a laundry bag, or to store things away until next season, or as a packing bag for your suitcase. I really hope you make one, and if you do, please tag me at Sewing Patterns by Mrs H. Thank you very much for sewing with me, and I'll see you next time.